I'm Jamey Applegate, Senior Director of DEI at Equity at Work, and this is your DEI Minute, your go-to podcast for leaders looking to navigate the ever-evolving landscape of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Whether you're just starting out with DEI or looking to sustain your long-term successes, each episode will provide you with the actions you can take to move DEI forward at your organization, all in 15 minutes or less. Join us every other week as we break through the noise and help you do DEI right. Let's get to it.
Before we get started, this is Michelle Pfefferman, and I'm really excited to let you know that my new book, Do DEI Right, is now available. This is your guide to the Equity at Work maturity model, which shows leaders how to make DEI part of every day and drive great results. You can get your copy through the link in the show notes or wherever books are sold.
In this episode, I'm going to talk about the concept of thought diversity, which got a lot of attention very early in the new Trump administration with their efforts to influence and assert control over our nation's colleges and universities. The administration claims that these institutions of higher education are too liberal or left-leaning, and they are indoctrinating students with what they call radical leftist ideologies. And one of the remedies that they propose is requirements around intellectual or thought diversity, even going so far as to suggest that faculty quotas based on political affiliation would be a good idea. So thought diversity also got a lot of attention when Indiana, which is my home state, enacted Senate Enrolled Act 202, often called the Intellectual Diversity Law, and it took effect in mid-2024. This law required faculty at public colleges and universities to promote intellectual diversity, and it was defined as creating exposure to multiple, divergent, and varied scholarly perspectives related to public policy in the classroom. Supporters of the law argue that, much like the Trump administration is saying now, colleges and universities are too left-leaning, and that this law helps ensure broader exposure to diverse viewpoints, specifically conservative viewpoints. Critics argue that the law is purposefully broad and vague, that it doesn't accurately define intellectual diversity or how to achieve it. They also say that its use in tenure decisions is very problematic because it is subjective and will ultimately chill classroom discussion, faculty research, and academic freedom. So you may have heard of the phrase thought diversity before. Prior to the current focus on higher education, you may have heard it used in relation to other types of diversity, specifically conversations around gender and racial diversity. Many folks, including folks that we have worked with, who offer critiques of efforts to promote and advance gender and racial diversity, offer up thought diversity as some sort of preferred alternative. And that was certainly my experience. I will say, from a purely objective lens, I think thought diversity actually sounds pretty great. I think it's more perspectives, more ideas, better conversations, better outcomes. But when you listen closely, people often mean very different things by it, and lately, the term itself has become controversial. So today we're going to slow down. What is thought diversity? When does it actually help? And when does it start to cause problems? So let's start with, what do people mean by thought diversity? At a basic level, thought diversity just means different ways of thinking or different perspectives. That can include political views, but it's broader than that. It can mean different disciplines, different methods, different assumptions about what matters or how problems should be solved. So two people might agree on the goal, including in the workplace, but then we disagree completely on how to get there. Someone might approach that problem thinking through data and modeling and statistics, and another sort of thinking through more history and context. That's thought diversity. Something that a lot of folks point out is that it's not just about who's in the room, it also is about what happens once they're there. Are people allowed to disagree? Are they expected to explain themselves? Or are some ideas quietly or not so quietly off limits? So when does thought diversity work well? When thought diversity works, it works in a pretty ordinary way. It slows people down. If everyone agrees too quickly, that might be a warning sign. Disagreement forces people to say what they really mean. It exposes assumptions that might otherwise go unnoticed. This is why diverse teams typically perform better on complicated problems. Not because we're just saying, oh, we have, this racial diversity and this gender diversity, and not because the conversations are smoother, they're usually messier, but we can just get different perspectives. Different diverse perspectives mean that we can catch things like mistakes or assumptions or little things that are going to cause bumps down the line a little earlier. There's also a testing effect. So ideas get stronger when they are challenged. Weak ideas don't survive. That's how the entire scientific process works. Someone posits a hypothesis, you test it, and you see what happens. That's how good organizations work. Disagreement in those settings is not a failure. It is an inherent and necessary part of a process. But there's also another piece that's very easy to miss, and that's trust. People tend to trust decisions more when they can see the discussions and disagreements that got them there. So even if they don't like the final decision, they're more likely to accept it if they believe that other views were seriously considered or if a lot of viewpoints were brought in and incorporated. So that's why it's really important to have feedback processes and multiple rounds of revisions and discussions. Those aren't signs of dysfunction. They're signals that we want to get it right, and we want to invite disagreement and discussion to get there. Thought diversity, when it's real, actually strengthens legitimacy and improves decision-making processes, getting more voices into the room. But there's a whole other side to this, and that's where thought diversity starts to break down. So thought diversity also does not improve conversations. In fact, the phrase is often used in ways that undermine the very things it's supposed to protect. I'm going to walk through a couple of sort of basic problems with the concept of thought diversity, especially when it's used in a more harmful way. One common problem is false balance. A lot of news organizations try to present both sides. There's this phrase called both sidesism, where no matter what you're talking about, you want to also give voice and space to the exact opposite viewpoint. That's okay in some situations. But if we're talking about racism, and someone is saying racism is a huge problem and it's very bad, and then you invite someone who goes, I actually think that racism is good, what's the purpose of that? So false balance is when every viewpoint is treated as equally valid, even when the evidence isn't equal. In those cases, thought diversity doesn't clarify anything. It actually just sows confusion, and it also legitimizes views that are not okay. People are left thinking that there's a genuine debate when there actually isn't one. Not every issue has two sides. Another issue is what some people refer to as coercive neutrality. So this is when someone is told that they have to present both sides, even if one side isn't appropriate or doesn't make sense. That doesn't encourage open discussion or agreement. It distorts it. Thought diversity can also be used to create a chilling effect, and we see this so much in the higher education debate. When rules around thought diversity are vague, like you must have thought diversity, and you can't only present one side, and when enforcement of it relies on complaints or punishments, people are going to play it safe. They're going to avoid controversial topics, they're going to simplify, and they're going to self-censor. They are not going to share what they're thinking. They're going to share what they think the other people want to hear. So that focus on encouraging diversity of thought ends up actually causing people to stay quiet and not share their thoughts and perspectives. Additionally, a focus on thought diversity can be used to discredit expertise. We have a very significant challenge in this country where a lot of people are very, very, very hesitant to trust expertise. You see it in education, you see it in science, you see it in health, you see it in the entirety of what is happening with the Department of Health and Human Services, run by RFK Jr. It is done, and you suggest that any strong claim is just an ideology, that it must be ideologically driven, or that all perspectives cancel each other out. In those moments, the thought diversity, it stops being about openness to new ideas, and it actually starts being about power. It gets who gets to make decisions. Finally, it can be used to assert a false choice around larger diversity efforts. So something that I was really frustrated in when I was working with a client a couple of years ago was he was so focused on the idea of thought diversity, and he said we need to stop focusing on race and gender, we need to focus on diversity of thought. And the thing that I could not get this person to understand was that you don't actually have to choose between them. You can do both. If you prioritize thought diversity over other forms of diversity, you're explicitly or implicitly saying that those other forms of diversity and therefore other people's identities matter less. That your preference to think about thought diversity is more important than a part of them that maybe is their race or their gender that matters to them. It is cynical. It is unnecessary. We can promote thought diversity as part of a larger goal of promoting diversity in all its forms. We don't have to choose. We can do both. Operationally, thought diversity is also very messy. Who gets to decide which ideas count? Who gets labeled as biased? Who ends up having to justify themselves over and over? These are questions that matter, and they're often hidden behind neutral-sounding language. But there is good news. Healthy thought diversity tends to emerge naturally. It is shaped by clear and consistent professional norms. Disagreement should be expected, but so are professional standards. Evidence matters. If you're going to dispute something, what is the evidence to dispute it? The goal is not to force disagreement and discussion. It is to permit productive conflict in the pursuit of the best possible outcome. If you're trying to figure out whether thought diversity is actually working in a given space, here are some simple questions you can ask. What is the evidence? What are the facts? What viewpoints are missing? What viewpoints will help inform this decision? Is a call for diversity of thought making the conversation more robust, or are people getting quieter? If it leads to productive arguments and better reasoning and better outcomes, you're doing something right. If it leads to false equivalences, if it leads to people being fearful or silent, it probably isn't going right. And ultimately, it's not a zero-sum game. Thought diversity is a good thing when it is implemented in a productive, thoughtful way as a complement to larger diversity efforts. Everyone should be able to bring their experiences and perspectives to the workplace and use them to advance the mission of the organization. But when it is used as a cudgel against evidence and expertise, or it is used to avoid messy conversations about other types of diversity, it's not going to go well. So really the focus on how can we promote thought diversity as part of our larger focus on diversity and not use it to negate other forms of diversity or to actually deny the opportunity to share your perspective. Thanks so much.
That's a wrap. I'm Jamey Applegate, and that's your DEI Minute for today. Thank you for listening. Please be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts, and don't forget to leave us a review. If you ever have questions, please visit our website or send us an email. You can also sign up for our newsletter and follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Links to everything can be found in the episode notes. This episode was edited and produced by Podgrowth with podcast art by me, Jamey Applegate.